want to talk about the Alex Jones case. Now, I'm going to talk about this. First of all, I'll make it clear where I'm at here. I'm going to talk about this through the lens of defamation, and I am somebody who finds defamation cases incredibly intriguing. I'm interested in free speech law. I'm fascinated by it. I've studied it over the years. Of course, I'm not an attorney, but I do kind of study it, and I had a long conversation about the Alex Jones case with a buddy of mine who is an attorney and does specialize in law that is sort of near free speech law. It's sort of like, I mean, he specializes in patent law and stuff like that, which isn't directly free speech specifically, but it's kind of a nearby neighbor, if you will. So he knows a lot about free speech law. He had to study it very intently when he was in law school. And we had a long conversation about this strictly from the standpoint of the law. I'm not interested in making a moral, having a moral discussion around this whole thing. I've always been pretty upfront about where I stand. I'm not a fan of Alex Jones. I don't appreciate what he does. I don't see any value in it. My personal guess is that he totally knew the whole time that there was no way the Sandy Hook thing was a hoax. I don't think for one second he actually entertained the idea that was true. I think he said it because he knows where his bread's buttered. That's what I think. And I think that was a terrible thing to do. But this isn't about like what's Ron's moral assessment of this. This is about the law itself. So that's what I want to talk about. Whatever your feelings are about Alex Jones one way or another, whatever. I'm interested from a standpoint of the law. And a thing that's really interesting here, folks, we have seen not one, but two prominent defamation cases within the past few months. I can't think of any other time in as long as I've been alive where such a thing has happened. Keep in mind, defamation is incredibly hard to prove. It is very, very difficult to prove. You do not see defamation cases often. And by the way, there's a reason it should be really hard to prove. Because if it wasn't hard to prove, there would be defamation cases every second of every day. Because somebody would say something about someone powerful that someone powerful didn't like, and they'd frickin' sue them. That's why we have defamation laws and why it's very hard to prove and why you really have to make the case. Because otherwise, you're going to stifle free speech. Otherwise, you're going to stifle people's ability to criticize those in power. But defamation laws should exist. Why? Well, because if you deliberately smear somebody, if you deliberately spread lies about somebody to harm them and harm their livelihood and harm their lives, well, they should be able to do something about that. So I'm all about defamation laws existing. And I'm all about the idea that, yeah, it's not easy to prove. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. There's a reason our free speech laws work the way they do. And it's because in order to preserve something as precious as free speech, you have to put up with speech that you don't like. But that doesn't mean that anyone can just say whatever the hell they want and there's never going to be any consequence. If you think that's what free speech is, well, you're not familiar with what our free speech laws are, because that's not exactly what it is. Anyway, so that's the perspective I'm coming from for the Alex Jones thing. So here's what happened. Let's first go to the conclusion here. I'm sure you guys already know, but here's how that thing ended. Alex Jones, $49.3 million verdict in the future of misinformation. Oh, by the way, the two prominent cases I'm referring to, by the way, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing and the Alex Jones thing. By the way, in both cases, I wasn't super familiar with Johnny Depp, Amber Heard. I didn't pay attention to their relationship, because the world's collapsing and there's just more important things. But again, from a defamation standpoint, it's very fascinating. So is this one. Alex Jones, $49.3 million verdict and the future of misinformation. This is the headline from AP. Alex Jones is facing a hefty price tag for his lies about the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre. $49.3 million in damages and counting for claiming the nation's deadliest school shooting was a hoax, a punishing salvo, and a fledgling war on harmful misinformation. This is from the article. But what does this week's verdict, the first of 3 Sandy Hook-related cases against Jones to be decided, mean for the larger misinformation ecosystem? Uh, here's the thing I wanted to highlight here. I think this kind of sums it up. U.S. courts have long held that defamatory statements, falsehoods damaging the reputation of a person or a business, aren't protected as free speech, but lies about other subjects like science, history, or the government are. For example, saying COVID-19 isn't real is not defamatory, but spreading lies about a doctor treating coronavirus patients is. Okay, so why is that the case? Well, that's the case because otherwise, who you would have to determine that something is a lie and something is true, and um not just a difference of analysis. So if you just said, "Oh, lies is defamation." If you lie about something, it's like, well, what qualifies a lie? What if someone gets something wrong at first and then corrects themselves? Was that a lie? Was that defamation? Is this a lie? Is that a lie? Which is the lie? Where's the lie at? So if you just said that quote unquote lies were defamation, regardless of how bogus something is or isn't, it'd be a really slippery slope enforcing something like that. But if you defame another person where you're harming them, well, then other individuals are involved. So you need to have laws there. So that's why those laws exist the way they do. And in the case of the Alex Jones case, what was he being accused of? Well, he was being accused of defaming these parents. He alluded to them being crisis actors and alluded that Sandy Hook wasn't real. Now, full disclaimer, I've not seen all of his content on this topic. So this is all that I'm getting from the court proceedings themselves. I personally have not watched his content on the topic. Um, I have only watched a handful of Alex Jones clips in my life. It's always been for research related purposes, and I've never really, appreciated any of it. It's performance art. And so that's what he was being accused of. Now, this on its surface is incredibly hard to prove because, first of all, you need to prove a couple things. You need to prove, at the very least, gross negligence, and you need to prove some kind of malicious intent. Now, how do you define malicious intent in this case? I mean, the most obvious malicious intent would be that Alex Jones had some vendetta against these parents and he wanted to make these parents' lives miserable. That would be incredibly hard to prove, wouldn't it? Why would Alex Jones have some kind of random vendetta against strangers? Like why would he have some random vendetta against strangers? That would be really hard to prove. It would be hard to prove that he made this stuff up because he wanted to harm those parents and those children, people he didn't know. What's more plausible is that he spread bogus information on purpose because he knew it was profitable for him. Can you define that as malicious intent? Well, that gets a little slippery, doesn't it? Because if you're just going to say, well, he said this because he wanted to make money. Well, we have a for-profit media ecosystem. So you could use that for any piece of news. They wanted to make money. You could say that that's malicious intent whenever you want. So that's a little complicated there, right? So what's the other thing? Gross negligence. Now that's a little easier, I would say. Again, we're talking from a court of law standpoint here, because what did Alex Jones have to go on that he had any reasonable reason to believe that the Sandy Hook shooting was not real? What did he have to go on? Now, the way this court unrolled, it looks like he had nothing. It looks like he had nothing to go on. But if he had some kind of thing that he could point to, some kind of like regardless of how weak it was or wasn't, you could say in a court of law, like, okay, well, you're very irresponsible. And this is insanely poor an excuse for journalism. But can we go as far as to say gross negligence? That's kind of tough because there's this one thing you can hang your hat on. Now, if he has nothing, that's different. But still, you got to dovetail it into malicious intent. Well, who was he trying to harm there? So you see how defamation, by itself is incredibly hard to prove. It's incredibly hard, regardless of how bogus something is or isn't. I mean, I think that implying that the Sandy Hook shooting was not real is bogus beyond comprehension and incredibly offensive. But again, looking at it strictly from the court of law, and there's a reason these laws exist the way they do, that's incredibly hard to prove. Yet, Alex Jones, and let's be honest, Alex Jones has a few bucks. He ain't starving. He probably was able to hire the best lawyers, although apparently they accidentally released his text, so I don't know how good they were. But he lost. So why did he lose? How were they able to pin this on him? Or how were they able to get a guilty verdict? Here's what I think. So again, saying all that, defamation, incredibly hard to prove. No matter who you are, no matter what you're claiming, defamation, incredibly hard to prove. What the court did throughout this trial is they really, if you notice, and I don't have like a ton of video footage to play here, there's just one clip I want to share, but I'm sure a lot of you watching follow this court case pretty closely because it's intriguing, and as far as free speech law is concerned. They really tried to catch him in lies constantly. They would always try to catch Alex Jones in lies, and they were successful at it. There were a couple times where they called him out. They were like, you weren't telling the truth here. You weren't telling the truth about this. You weren't telling the truth when you confessed here. Alex Jones did not do himself any favors in that courtroom. So by doing this, you're painting the picture of a person who lies and does so deliberately. Why is that significant to do? Because while the law of defamation is incredibly hard to prove, and it's written in a way that it's not an easy hurdle to overcome in a court of law, these trials are still jury-based, which means the jury still gets the say. So if you paint this guy as a liar, that's going to sway their decision. And here's the moment that I think really defined the outcome of this. This is from Now This, but this footage is everywhere. Let's go ahead and start it at the beginning.
I wanted to tell you to your
Okay,
face,
so
'cause
this is one of the moms of one of the victims. Scarlett Lewis, her 6-year-old Jessie was killed in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. Here's what she said to Alex Jones in the court. We're going to start this from the beginning.
I wanted to tell you to your face because I wanted you to know that I am a mother first and foremost, and I know that you're a father, and my son existed. You're still on your show today trying to say that I'm implying that I'm an actress, that I'm deep state. You have this week. Truth is so vital to our world. Truth is what we base our reality on. We have to agree on that to have a civil society. Sandy Hook is a hard truth. Hard truth. Nobody would want to ever believe that 26 kids could be murdered. Nobody would ever want to believe that. I understand people not wanting to believe that, actually. I don't want to believe it. Jessie was real. I am a real mom. There's nothing out there. Nothing. There's records of Jessie's birth, of me. I mean, I have a history, and there's nothing that you could have found because it doesn't exist.
See what she's getting there? She's hinting towards the gross negligence. Again, kind of like what I was just saying. Nothing you could have found. There's nothing you can hang your hat on where it's just like, okay, this is why I thought that this might be true. She's saying there's nothing out there. It doesn't exist.
That I'm deep state. It's just not true. I know you know that. That's the problem. I know you know that. And you keep saying it. You keep saying it. Why? Why? For money?
Now she's diving into malicious intent. Are you saying it for money? You know you're grossly negligent. You're overlooking what this could do to us. We, the parents of the victims. You're not giving any mind to that because you just want your paycheck. And that's how they're dovetailing it into malicious intent. And that's how the court ruled. All right, so let's watch the rest of this.
Because you've made a lot of money while you've said it. I know I know you believe me. And yet you're going to leave this courthouse and you're going to say it again on your show. You're saying no, you just did it.
Now, at one point, I don't know if it was right after that or like shortly after or around the same time, but at one point, Alex Jones said, I believe to that mom, I don't believe you're an actress. Like I know that this is true. And at one point he also said it's real, it's all real. And he tried to make it out like he said that they won't let him retract it. He said like he's been trying to retract it, they just won't let him. The media just won't acknowledge the fact that he's retracted it. Now, when he said when he acknowledged that person, when he acknowledged that person and said, I believe you're not an actress, the judge reprimanded him. The judge told him to stop talking. Now, why did the judge do that? Was it just because the judge was, trying to shut him up, just didn't want him? No, the judge did that because at the time, he wasn't being asked a direct question, but he just did something that will influence the jury. So he did like he wasn't being asked. He wasn't being asked anything by the defense. He wasn't being asked anything by the prosecution. A witness was, yeah, they were acknowledging him. They were confronting him. But in a court of law, you can't respond to something like that because by doing so, that's going to influence a jury because the jury's going to hear, okay, he just said that he believes her, that he's acknowledging that what she's saying is true. And she's saying there was nothing out there that would have led you to this conclusion that the Sandy Hook shooting was not real, that my son's death was not real. There's nothing out there. So that's why that judge told him to stop talking. It's like, you can't talk right now. Then this will taint the trial itself. And that's why he was stopped. So this is how defamation works. And it's incredibly intriguing. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure what to expect because as I was watching things unfold, I'm like, okay, they're really catching this guy stepping in it left and right. They got all of his text messages. He's stepping in it left, right, and center. And the jury's going to decide this. So on the other hand, defamation, incredibly freaking hard to prove. Again, regardless of your moral feelings about, what happened, regardless of all that, regardless of what you think about Alex Jones one way or another, I'm interested in the law itself.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your